the focus that I want to have today is on food, on our life sustainers, and how that fits into our governance structures. Food being one of the most important parts of our entire social, spiritual, environmental, and later on, economic structure of our people, and how that system has changed, and how we are now in a position where we need to be bringing that back in line, in alignment with the needs of the Commonwealth of Life. Although most people call us Mohawk, Anyagihaga is a designation we use for our nation, and it means people of the Flint. We're part of several Mohawk communities that are spread throughout what is now called Southern Ontario, Quebec, and New York State. And our traditional territory, however, ranges more than 9.5 million acres, all the way down to the Adirondack Mountains to the Susquehanna River near Albany, New York. We're part of the Iroquois Confederacy that joined together 5 nations and later 6 nations in peaceful relations. And the term we use for our people is Haudenosaunee people, which means they literally translates as they build houses. And the longhouse structure of our people was the physical structure that we lived in the past, and also the social, political. It was everything to our people. And today, we still have our longhouses, and we still use them for our social and political purposes and spiritual purposes as well. We're traditionally an agricultural people, and that's why I wanted to focus a little bit on food, because of how important food is and was to our people. Corn, bean, and squash were the primary foods of our people. We call them our 3 sisters, or Asanibundanoza. And we grew them in a very sophisticated symbiotic relationship to each other. Agriculture was carried out in a collaborative fashion with very specific gender roles. The men would clear the land, the women would plant, maintain, and harvest the gardens. And the crops would be shared amongst the families in our communities. These life sustainers, like I said before, were integral to our social, political, spiritual systems of governance, which was based on a deep-rooted respect for the natural world and all the vital functions that each and every part of the web of life contributes to it. The words that Stuart shared with all of us this morning serve as a constant reminder of our responsibility to continue offering our respect to the natural world through our everyday actions. Traditionally, our people had no concept of land ownership, but instead the land was shared in common by the whole community. Families of women would farm a piece of land, and the harvest would be shared among the families. In 1880, the World Bank surveys that were commissioned by what's now called the Department of Indian Affairs divided our land into parcels. And the concept of private land ownership was established in our community. And this action forever changed the relationship that we had with each other and with the land. Although we were sedentary people, we generally moved our villages every 8 to 20 years, depending on the fertility of our soils and the availability of food, in search of more plentiful food supplies, and also to give the soils the chance to rest and regenerate. After various moves from the Mohawk Valley, we finally settled in our current location on the south shore of the St. Lawrence River. And the custom of relocating our villages at that point was halted by the French community of Châteauguay, which prevented further access westward. And of course, this permanent settlement completely impacted our ability to farm and maintain fertile soils, especially for our very nutrient-intensive crops like corn. Our economy started changing, our barter economy started changing in the 1800s when different and more intensive farming techniques were introduced by the Europeans. And as our community tried to adopt some of these techniques, we didn't have the same kind of capital to invest, and we couldn't compete with the surrounding farmers using the more intensive farming techniques. The men started to work away from the village, and the concept of the farming just started to decline dramatically in our community. people started to lease their land to non-native farmers in the surrounding areas so that an income could at least be generated for the families. And eventually, small garden plots that were cared for by individual families became the norm. And people had to sell or barter some of their own produce. And by the 70s and even a bit earlier, very little farming was done as grocery stores and fast food became readily available. In the past, our people consumed meat only as needed, only in order to survive. And of course, the factory farming, with the increase of factory farming, meat has become a staple in our communities. And of course, the food industry doesn't recognize or even acknowledge the huge environmental or health impacts that this intensive system is having on the Commonwealth of Life. And people in our community don't even realize how their consumption of these products is impacting the environment. So illnesses, diet-related illnesses, heart disease, diabetes, have been plaguing our community for the last few generations. And in most recent years, we're seeing the fear spreading about pandemics, of course, some of which are originating from factory farms. All of these problems, including climate change, environmental degradation, and depressed economy, are inspiring our people at the local level to re-examine our food security issues. And we're seeing a quiet revolution of sorts that's starting to take hold in our community. A growing number of people are planting again and becoming re-informed about our traditional foods. This is primarily being done on an individual basis. However, a lot of movement is also occurring in our longhouses. Our spiritual political systems are promoting the agriculture and seed saving and actually planting tracts of land for use of the produce during our festivals and ceremonies. A few years ago, we initiated a community shared agricultural project with a nearby farmer with the hope to warm the community up to the idea of eventually developing our own local CSA. And there's been much interest and participation in the program.